Welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're jumping into the Gypsy Joker Motorcycle Club.
That's right.
We've got some really interesting source material here looking at this one percenter club.
hmm We'll be exploring their history, their activities, the reputation they've built up.
And they're not just in the US, right? They have a big presence down in Australia, too.
Exactly. So we'll cover both. We've pulled out what we think are the key details, the most compelling parts of their story from the info we have.
Should give everyone listening a pretty solid picture.
Hopefully, yeah. A real insight into this specific club.
Okay, so first things first. This term one percenter, we hear it a lot with motorcycle clubs. What's the actual meaning behind it?
Well, the story goes, it dates back to just after World War II. The American Motorcyclist Association supposedly said something like, 99% of motorcycle riders are good, law-abiding citizens.
Implying the other 1% aren't.
Exactly. So clubs like the Gypsy Jokers, they kind of embrace that label. It basically means they see themselves as outside the mainstream, operating by their own rules.
So it's more than just a name. It's like an identity, a rejection of normal society.
Yeah, absolutely. It often involves a really strong code of loyalty to the club above pretty much everything else, even the law.
Creates that us versus them kind of thing, I imagine.
Definitely. Shapes how they interact with the world, for sure.
Okay, got it. So when did the Gypsy Jokers actually start? And where?
They were founded April 1st, 1956.
April Fool's Day. Huh.
Yeah, maybe a bit symbolic, right?
Yeah.
And it started in San Francisco, California. So they've been around a while.
Over 65 years. And they didn't just stay in California.
No, definitely not. They expanded overseas pretty successfully.
We mentioned Australia, but where else?
Well, they've got a significant presence or notoriety in Germany and Norway, too, according to our sources.
Wow, okay. US, Australia, Germany, Norway. That's quite widespread.
It really is for this kind of club.
And something that jumped out at me straight away was about getting in the club. It sounds incredibly tough.
Yeah, Professor Arthur Vino mentions this in his book, The Brotherhoods.
Right.
He talks about a really difficult membership process, like a prospecting period of at least 2 years.
2 years. Just to see if you can become a full member.
That's what the source indicates, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a serious, serious commitment.
Makes you really wonder what goes on inside, doesn't it? That level of exclusivity.
It really does. It points to, a strong hierarchy, a big emphasis on loyalty, obedience, making absolutely sure someone fits before they get the full patch.
And maybe that helps explain how they expanded and stuck around, especially somewhere like Australia.
Could be. That internal cohesion,
Right. Well, let's talk about Australia then. It sounds like they made a big impact there, maybe not always in a good way. How did that start?
Okay, so the Gypsy Joker MC Australia chapter, that kicked off in November 1969.
In Sydney.
Yep, Sydney first. It was apparently started by some guys who'd left another club, the St. Mary's Motorcycle Club.
Any reason given?
The info says they preferred Harley-Davidson specifically. So maybe a brand loyalty thing sparked the split.
Interesting. A club founded partly on bike preference, and they grew from there.
Oh, yeah. There was this friendly amalgamation with another club called the Mandamas MC.
Friendly amalgamation, so they basically merged.
Seems like it. The Mandamas were based in South Australia. Joining forces like that really boosted the Gypsy Joker's profile, especially in the south and west of Australia.
And Western Australia seems key here.
Very key. They established a strong presence there and, well, the source calls them one of Australia's most violent bikey gangs.
Bikey, that's the Aussie term, right?
Yeah, common term for outlaw motorcycle club members there.
Yeah.
And yeah, most violent, that's a heavy reputation.
And the specific cases mentioned really seem to back that up. Let's start with Leslie Lee Hottie. He was the national president.
That's right. And in 2001, there was this major incident. The police in Western Australia seized his home, declared it proceeds of crime. Basically, they believed it was bought with money from illegal activities.
And how did he react?
Apparently not well. The source says he was enraged, yelled death threats at the officers. "I know where you fuckers all live," is the quote mentioned.
Jeez. That wouldn't have helped his case.
No. He got charged for the threats, and the Crown kept his assets, so he actually died a poor man in 2004. A pretty stark outcome.
Shows the high stakes involved. Then there's the Hancock case. That sounds like a really big deal.
It was huge. Probably the thing they're most notorious for in Australia. We're talking about the 2001 car bomb murder of Don Hancock.
And he was a former top detective.
Yeah, Western Australia's former chief detective.
Duh.
It's pretty shocking.
What led up to it?
Well, the background seems to involve some kind of fight or altercation at a hotel. Hancock owned in a place called Orabanda.
Okay.
And shortly after that, a Gypsy Joker member, Billy Grierson, was shot dead at a campsite nearby.
And Hancock was suspected.
Allegations were made that Hancock was the shooter, yeah. So the car bombing that killed Hancock later is widely seen as retaliation by the Gypsy Jokers.
Wow. A direct hit on a former top cop. That's intense.
Absolutely. It created massive headlines and really cemented that violent reputation.
And it doesn't sound like that was an isolated thing. The sources list quite a few other incidents in Australia.
Yeah, there's a string of them, like a member getting assaulted in Adelaide just because he wouldn't take off his helmet and sunglasses when asked.
Suggests they expect a certain level of, I don't know, deference.
Maybe. Or just quick to react. Then you got police raiding clubhouses. Perth, in 2008, they found major fortifications.
Fortifications? Like what?
A concrete wall, surveillance cameras, reinforced doors. Serious stuff.
What did the club say about that?
Their explanation was apparently that burglaries were really high in that area.
Okay. What else?
Well, there's mention of 2 members jailed in 2009 for a really nasty assault back in 2007. Used metal pipes? Yeah. And another member caught during a traffic stop in 2007 with a lot of cash, plus weapons, a gun, a baton, pepper spray, ammo.
So weapons charges, assaults, it paints a picture?
It does. And it seems to escalate. There was a member charged with attempted murder in 2009.
Who did they try to kill?
A member of the New Boys gang, who was apparently also a former Hell's Angel. The shooting happened right outside the New Boys clubhouse in Adelaide.
Gang rivalry, then.
Looks like it. And then also in 2009, a drug-related shootout in Perth involved 5 Gypsy Jokers.
Anyone hurt?
Yeah, several injuries, including their own club president at the time, Leonard Mark Kirby.
So internal conflict or conflict with others over drugs?
The source suggests drug-related, yeah.
Yeah.
It really implies a dangerous environment.
And then there's the Anthony Parrish case. That sounds really serious.
Extremely serious. This was in 2012. Anthony Parrish, who was a Gypsy Joker, got sentenced. But not just him.
Who else?
His brother, Andrew Parrish, who was actually a member of the Rebels MC, another big club.
Wait, so brothers and rival or different major clubs?
Seems so. And a third man, Matthew Lawton. They were all sentenced for the murder of a drug trafficker named Terry Falconer. Plus, conspiracy, firearms, drug offenses, the works.
Murder, conspiracy, and involving members from 2 different major clubs. That's significant.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It shows the severity of the crimes and, yeah, those potential links between different outlaw clubs in, the criminal underworld.
Definitely paints a picture of the Australian scene. Let's shift back to the U.S. now. The Donald Manuel Paradis case you mentioned earlier sounds pretty wild.
It's a real saga. Paradis was a leader in the Gypsy Jokers. He was convicted back in 1981.
For what, exactly?
The 1980 murders of Kimberly Ann Palmer and her boyfriend Scott Currier. It happened in Washington State, but their bodies were moved to Idaho.
So he was tried in Idaho.
Yeah, which is part of the complexity.
Yeah.
And he actually received a death sentence there.
But you said it was overturned.
That's right. It took years, a lot of appeals, public pressure. But eventually it came out that the prosecution had withheld evidence.
Evidence that could have helped him.
Exactly. Exculpatory evidence. So the conviction was thrown out, and he was released in 2001.
Wow, that's a huge miscarriage of justice if evidence was deliberately withheld.
It really highlights the importance of due process, doesn't it? Even in cases involving, alleged members of outlaw clubs. There was someone named David Bond who was crucial to his release. Paradis even said, "Dave Bond believed in me."
Adds a human element to it all.
It does.
Okay, shifting gears slightly, what about those clubhouse raids in the U.S.? You mentioned Portland and Kennewick.
Right, so 2004, Cortland, Oregon. Police raided the Gypsy Joker clubhouse there.
What were they looking for?
2 guys wanted for armed robbery. One was known as Brick.
Did they find them?
No, not at the clubhouse. Interestingly, the club actually sued the Portland police afterward.
Sued them? For what?
Claiming damages were caused during the raid.
Huh. Okay. What about the Kennewick raid? That's in Washington State.
Yeah, that was later, in 2008. That raid seemed more successful from the police perspective.
How so?
They arrested 4 men for possession of methamphetamine. And they also found stolen property and weapons inside the clubhouse.
So drugs, stolen goods, weapons, suggesting ongoing issues there too.
He's that way, yes.
And wasn't there also an incident involving the FBI stopping a large group of members?
Yeah, that was in Idaho in 2009, a pretty significant event.
What happened?
The FBI detained a whole group, somewhere between 60 and 70 Gypsy Joker members, right off the interstate, I-84.
60 to 70, that's a lot. What did the FBI do?
According to the source, they were all searched, questioned, and photographed.
Photographed, like mugshots.
The implication is it was for intelligence gathering.
Yeah.
Building records for future reference regarding gang activity shows a high level of federal interest.
Definitely. It feels like they're constantly under surveillance, both sides of the Pacific.
That's the impression you get.
Now, there's another case from Oregon, the Robert Huggins murder. This one sounds particularly nasty.
It really does. Robert Huggins was a former high-ranking member, so this seems like an internal club matter that went horribly wrong.
What happened to him?
He was kidnapped and murdered. His body was found in July 2015, and the details are, well, they're gruesome.
How so?
The source mentions he was severely beaten, nails had been shot through his boots, an X was carved on his body, and his teeth were knocked out.
God, that's brutal torture, essentially.
It certainly sounds like it, just horrific violence. Suggests, extreme internal discipline or retribution.
Were people charged for this?
Yes. By mid-2016, 3 people in Oregon were facing murder and kidnapping charges related to his death.
And did it go further?
It did. In January 2019, 6 Oregon Gypsy Joker members were indicted on federal charges.
Federal. What were the charges?
Things like murder and native racketeering, kidnapping resulting in death, conspiracy, really serious federal offenses.
And the motive?
The authorities alleged it was all done to maintain or even increase their own positions within the Gypsy Joker organization.
Using extreme violence to climb the ladder or enforce the hierarchy? Chilling.
Absolute chilling. And it links back to that idea of racketeering, suggesting the club itself is viewed by law enforcement as a criminal enterprise in some contexts.
There was also a raid connected to this investigation, right?
Yes. The North Portland clubhouse was raided again in 2016 as part of the Huggins murder investigation.
Okay. And bringing us almost up to the present day, there's that fentanyl case in Washington.
Yeah, very recent, April 2024. This involved 2 brothers, Kyle Ray Campbell and Cameron Earl Campbell.
And their connection.
They're the sons of the late president of the Kennewick, Washington chapter. The same chapter whose clubhouse was raided back in 2008.
And what were they sentenced for?
Possession with intent to distribute fentanyl. Significant amounts, it seems. They got hefty federal prison sentences.
How long?
25 years for one brother, 20 for the other.
Wow, that's major time. And fentanyl, that's obviously a huge issue right now.
Exactly. It shows that individuals connected to the club are allegedly involved in very serious, very current forms of drug trafficking. It's not just history we're talking about.
A very sobering update. So if we try to summarize all this, the sources paint a picture of a club associated with a pretty wide range of criminal activities, don't they?
They really do. The list provided is quite expensive.
What does it include?
Armed robbery, arson, assault, counterfeiting, drug trafficking, fraud, gun running, homicide, identity theft, motorcycle theft, even prostitution.
That covers pretty much the whole spectrum of serious crime.
It's a very broad and concerning list.
Oh.
It definitely shapes the club's reputation and explains the intense law enforcement focus we've seen, gives you, the listener, a sense of the scope of the allegations.
And one last detail mentioned is that they have rivals. It doesn't name them, but acknowledges they exist.
Right, which just adds another layer of potential conflict, doesn't it? Turf wars, clashes over illegal markets. It points to a whole complex and likely dangerous subculture.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground on the Gypsy Joker Motorcycle Club.
We sure have.
Key takeaways for me are definitely their long history, starting in the U.S. back in '56.
Right, San Francisco.
Then that international expansion, especially the major and often violent footprint in Australia.
Yeah, the Australian story is particularly stark. The Hancock case, the general reputation for violence.
And then in the U.S., we've seen these serious cases, too. Paradis, the Huggins murder, recent fentanyl trafficking. It's not like things are quiet there either.
Definitely not. And that difficulty of membership really sticks out, too, that 2-year prospecting period.
Yeah, it's just a very tight, very controlled group. So founded in the U.S., but maybe infamous for different reasons in different places.
That seems fair to say. They certainly generated a lot of attention, much of it negative, in Australia particularly.
So here's something to think about for everyone listening. You hear about this really tough process to get in, this long history, all these serious incidents. What does that really tell us about why people join these kinds of clubs? What's the appeal?
That's a great question. The loyalty, the brotherhood, maybe the rebellion.
And how does a group like this, with chapters in different countries, allegedly involved in so much serious crime, manage to keep going? despite all the police raids, the arrests, the international scrutiny.
Yeah, how do they sustain themselves across borders? It makes you wonder about their structure, their resilience, maybe their ability to adapt. It's complex.
Definitely leaves you thinking about the bigger picture of these outlaw clubs, their place in society, and the constant push and pull with law enforcement.
Indeed, it touches on themes of belonging, crime, control. Lots to mull over.